This image is familiar to anyone who has ever watched the news. White columns, a neat lawn, a house that seems to symbolize stability. It feels as if it has always stood here, like the very idea of American power itself. We are shown a picture of constancy and solidity, but if you look closer, it becomes clear that there is no eternity behind this facade. The history of the building is not a history of greatness. It is a history of constant problems. Moisture, cracks, fires, collapses, and urgent repairs. The White House has been on the verge of destruction more than once. It burned. It was completely gutted from the inside. Water stood in the basements, floors collapsed. What we see today is not the original 18th century house. It is a modern structure hidden inside old stone walls. A steel frame, concrete, kilometers of wiring, all hidden behind a historical shell. The White House was never designed for the load it bears today. Over the course of 200 years, it has been endlessly rebuilt, expanded, and reinforced. Each president changed the space to suit his own needs, and each time, the building had to be saved from another crisis. In this video, you will learn why the White House was built on a difficult site, how architectural mistakes began to appear almost immediately, what has actually survived from the original building, and why it had to be literally saved from collapse. After that, you will never be able to look at this building the same way again. But to understand how a symbol of power became an object of constant reconstruction, we need to go back to the very beginning, to ground zero, when there were no columns, no fences, no global politics here, only damp earth, marshy floodplains, and a river bursting its banks. The land here was openly hostile to humans. The Potomac River floodplain is essentially a malaria-ridden swamp with sticky clay. In the summer, the humidity was unbearable, causing everything from boots to wood to rot. George Washington did not choose this location for its strategic elevation or scenic beauty. It was a pure political compromise, a deal with the devil of geography. The southern states demanded a capital closer to them, threatening a split. The North gave in, but the capital ended up in the mud. The city existed only as an idea in one man's head. Architect Pierre L'Enfant, a Frenchman with imperial ambitions, dreamed of a new Rome. He sketched grandiose avenues, squares, and palaces of gigantic proportions on paper. His imagination knew no bounds, but it collided with the harsh reality of economics. Paper can bear anything, but the budget of a young, impoverished state cannot. There was physically no money in the treasury. The technology to construct monumental buildings did not exist. Skilled masons capable of carving columns had to be sought throughout Europe. The project began to fall apart even before the first stone was laid. L'Enfant's ambitions were ruthlessly curtailed. Instead of a palace that could rival Versailles, the project of Irishman James Hoban was approved. It was a modest, pragmatic, almost boring rectangle. But even for this box, there were not enough workers. The foundation of American freedom was laid by black slaves. They were rented from local plantation owners in Virginia and Maryland as living tools. They dug heavy clay, fired bricks in makeshift kilns, and felled centuries-old trees in winter. The White House literally stands on their backs and worn-out joints. The main mistake was made right from the start, in the choice of wall material. For cladding, for the sake of economy and speed, sandstone from the Aquia Creek quarry was chosen. It is a beautiful stone, soft and malleable for cutting, but it has a fatal geological flaw. It is too porous, like a frozen sponge. In Washington's climate, where humidity often reaches 100%, the stone began to drink water. It absorbed rain and fog, transferring moisture inside. The house began to die from moisture even before it was completed. By 1800, when John Adams, the second president, moved into the residence, it was a disaster zone. The construction site was surrounded by mountains of debris and dirt. The walls in the living quarters still smelled of wet lime plaster, causing coughing. Most rooms had no floors, just joists above the basement. Stairs ended in nothingness or led nowhere. First Lady Abigail Adams hung laundry in the East Room. It was the only room where the draft was strong enough to dry wet shirts. It was not a home or a symbol of power. It was a cold, echoing stone box standing in the middle of a wasteland. The building had barely begun to take on a domestic character when the War of 1812 broke out. The British fleet entered Chesapeake Bay not to capture territory. Their goal was the demonstrative destruction of the symbols of the young republic. The British entered Washington not as conquerors but as punitive forces. His Majesty's officers acted with frightening calm. They sat down at the table in the presidential dining room and drank the wine left behind by the fleeing James Madison. Then methodically, room by room, they set fire to the furniture and curtains. The fire, fanned by the draft through the broken windows, turned into a blast furnace. The temperature inside reached 1,000 degrees. Stone does not burn, but at such heat its structure changes. The sandstone began to crack and flake, losing its load-bearing capacity. The roof collapsed inward with a crash, like an artillery volley. It took the second-floor ceilings with it, sweeping away everything in its path. By morning, all that remained of the symbol of American power was a charred box of exterior walls. Inside were smoldering ashes and open sky. A critical question arose: demolish the ruins or rebuild? Pragmatism dictated moving the capital to a safe place, away from the coast. Many congressmen demanded to abandon the ashes, but symbolism demanded to stay and prove resilience.
Watch your step up there. Needs more mortar on this side.
It was decided to rebuild, despite the enormous cost. Architect Hoban returned to save his crippled creation, but the damage to the stone was irreversible, and the structure of the facade had been compromised by fire. The walls were still standing, but black scars from soot had eaten deep into the pores of the sandstone. It was impossible to wash or sand them off. The building looked like a burnt skeleton. Then a decision was made that determined the fate and name of the building for centuries to come. To hide the burns, the facade was covered with a thick layer of lime and lead white. The building got a new white skin. It was not an aesthetic or design move. It was a forced camouflage, an attempt to hide the trauma. The cracks, soot, and weakened stone remained hidden forever under a layer of white paint. The illusion of integrity was stretched over a dead body. Democracy is a physical strain on matter. When Andrew Jackson, the first people's president from the frontier, won the 1829 election, the rules changed. He opened the doors of his house to all comers, literally. Thousands of people in dirty boots, farmers and workers, poured into the reception rooms. The guards were swept away by the human wave. People stood on silk-covered furniture in dirty shoes to see their hero. They broke crystal and porcelain in the crush. They tore expensive curtains and carpets for souvenirs to take a piece of power with them. The crowd was only lured out onto the street by a trick, placing vats of alcoholic punch on the lawn. The house groaned under the overload. The wooden beams of the floors, not designed to support the weight of thousands of bodies, bent dangerously. The floors, created for waltzing couples and diplomats, creaked under the weight of the uncontrolled mass. The building felt its limits for the first time. In the mid-19th century, the building began to be modernized chaotically. The authorities did not think about the consequences when introducing new technologies. Lead water pipes were cut into the walls, piercing the supporting structures. Gas was brought in for lighting, drilling holes in the beams. These were veins and nerves forcibly cut into the old body. The pipes leaked, creating hidden pockets of rot in the floors where no one looked. Gas horns smoked the painted ceilings and burned oxygen. There was a constant threat of a gas explosion inside the enclosed space. They tried to make the house comfortable, but it resisted desperately. In winter, it was unbearably cold. Huge fireplaces sucked the heat up the chimney, creating drafts. In summer, it was unbearably stuffy and humid. There was no ventilation. Washington's sewage system was primitive and open. When the south wind blew, the smell of sewage from the neighboring swamps penetrated right into the Oval Office. In those years, power smelled of dampness, coal smoke, and ammonia. The Civil War turned the elegant mansion into a headquarters and barracks. Under Lincoln, Union soldiers slept in full uniform in the corridors, right on the floor. The second floor became the war's operations center. The floors were worn down by thousands of boots. The walls absorbed tobacco smoke and the smell of sweat. The telegraph clattered around the clock in the room next to the president's bedroom. The building vibrated with the tension of a country tearing itself apart. After the war, the era of Victorian excess began, an attempt to forget the horrors of the slaughter. The presidents of the late 19th century, Arthur Cleveland Garrison, tried to turn the government house into a cozy palace. They began to fill the space with things. The interiors were furnished with heavy mahogany furniture. The windows were covered with multi-layered velvet curtains that did not let in any light. Palm trees and huge pots of soil were placed in the halls, adding weight to the floors. Famous designer Louis Tiffany installed a giant colored glass partition in the hall. The decor became dense, stuffy, and oppressive. The house was dressed in a tight corset of velvet and gilding. But no one looked down under the carpets. Under layers of expensive parquet flooring, the floor beams, laid in 1817 after a fire, began to turn to dust. The wood was tired of bearing the weight of history. Woodworms and fungus did their quiet, invisible work in the dark. The building was held together by good faith in layers of varnish. Electricity installed in 1891 was a new shock to the system. Wires in rag insulation were laid directly on dry plaster. They were nailed to wood that was as dry as gunpowder. The insulation cracked and sparks flew into the voids in the walls. The White House became a giant fire trap, waiting for a single accidental spark. Theodore Roosevelt was a man of action, physical strength, and impatience. He couldn't live in a wax museum filled with palm trees. He needed an effective workspace to run his empire.
Completely compromised. Look at this dry rot.
Good heavens. The entire structure is failing.
He hired the best architectural firm of the era, McKim, Mead, and White. Their task was simple and radical: remove all the Victorian clutter, restore the house to the austerity, light, and air of the federal style. But when the architects began tearing up the floors for repairs, they were horrified. It turned out that the outward luxury concealed a disaster. The main support beam under the state dining room was rotten through. It was held up by rusted staples and construction debris. If the hall had been full of guests during a reception, the beam would have collapsed. A tragedy with dozens of victims was mathematically inevitable. Roosevelt revolutionized zoning. He realized that it was no longer possible to live and work in the same place. He ordered a temporary office wing to be built on the site of the greenhouses. This is how what we now call the West Wing came into being. It was a simple brick building connected to the house by a colonnade. The decision saved the residence from collapse by removing an army of clerks and secretaries from it. But it also created a new long-term problem. The temporary structure became the nerve center of world power. Power has a tendency to expand, filling any space available. The West Wing began to be built up, expanded in width, and offices were consolidated. Power demanded new square meters, and architects squeezed them out of thin air. Literally, the complex began to turn into a labyrinth. By 1948, Harry Truman was faced with an inescapable reality. The house was dying. The building was sending out distress signals that could not be ignored. The chandeliers in the Blue Room began to sway menacingly when someone simply walked down the hallway upstairs. The second floor had sagged so much that the doors no longer closed. The climax came when the leg of the president's daughter's piano broke through the floor. It hung over the ceiling of the family dining room below, like the sword of Damocles. Engineers conducted an emergency inspection and delivered a death sentence. The load-bearing structures were 100% worn out. The building could collapse at any moment, burying the president under the rubble. Truman was faced with a difficult choice. Cosmetic repairs were impossible. There was nothing to fix. Complete euthanasia of the interior was needed to save the shell. These are perhaps the most surreal photographs in the history of American architecture. Inside the sandstone exterior walls, absolute emptiness. Bulldozers drive where kings were once received.
We need to ensure the load-bearing calculations for this section are precise.
I agree. The stress points here concern me. We should double-check the riveting schedule.
Excavators dug a deep pit in the basement, removing centuries of soil. Everything wooden inside the building, floors, walls, stairs, was scraped out and burned. Only the historic stone shell remained, supported on the outside by a web of steel scaffolding. It was a moment of truth when the myth of antiquity was physically destroyed. A rigid, independent steel frame was inserted into the empty stone box. Now it was a modern office skyscraper disguised as an 18th century mansion. The wooden floors were replaced with monolithic concrete. 2 new basement levels were added for technical services. Ventilation and communications were hidden in thick false walls. The historic panels, fireplaces, and decor were returned to their places with museum-like precision. But it was now just a facade stretched over a steel skeleton. The White House ceased to be a house in the physical sense. It lost its wooden soul. It became a Class A bunker. The Cold War radically changed the very physics of the surrounding space and the priorities of state building. Now the main and most terrible threat to the residents was not accidental fire, not the rot of wooden floors, and not the natural collapse of old structures. The main threat, as calculated by military strategists, was a sudden nuclear strike by a Soviet ballistic missile. The old mansion could no longer guarantee the safety of the country's leader in the event of a global conflict. This required a radical rethinking of how a building of this level should look and function. All this large-scale underground work required hundreds of tons of extra-strong concrete and a huge number of lead panels for reliable protection against radiation. The building was finally transformed into a kind of architectural iceberg. Only the ornate top remained above ground for the press and tourists, while an invisible colossus designed for survival in the apocalypse was hidden underground. What ordinary tourists see today through the wrought iron fence is only the decorative part of a complex mechanism. Deep underground, powerful diesel generators hum incessantly, ready at any moment to take over the power supply for the entire complex. Special installations filter the air around the clock, cleansing it of possible toxins, chemicals, and radioactive dust. Huge server stations also operate silently there, ensuring uninterrupted communication with troops around the world. Technical life support and security have become much more important than the aesthetics of classical architecture. The threat of global terrorism has added new, highly visible layers of protection to the White House. After the tragic bombing in Oklahoma City in 1995, the authorities took the unprecedented decision to completely block traffic on Pennsylvania Avenue. This was an important symbolic and practical step that physically distanced the residents from the flow of ordinary cars. The famous house was effectively cut off from the city that it was supposed to lead and represent by law. Distance became the only way to protect against a possible attack by a truck bomb. After the events of September 11th, the house finally went into a deaf and impenetrable defense, turning into a real citadel. Right under the north lawn, in full view of the whole world, a giant multi-level complex was dug, the exact purpose of which is still not disclosed. No one except a small circle of insiders knows its actual depth, number of floors, and internal layout. All information about this construction is a strict state secret, guarded as carefully as the president himself. It was the most extensive renovation in the building's history. The construction of this facility took many years behind high white fences, which completely hid the huge excavation pit from the eyes of curious passers-by. Officially, administration representatives called this work a planned modernization of outdated communications and replacement of pipes. The glass in all the windows of the residence was replaced with special bulletproof panes, which are extremely thick and heavy. They are so dense that, from certain angles, they noticeably distort the sunlight passing through them. Hidden seismic sensors dug into the entire perimeter of the lawn are capable of instantly reacting even to the weight of a small squirrel. The airspace above this area of land is completely closed, and any unidentified object will be immediately shot down. The White House has officially become the most secure facility on the entire planet, but it has paid for this security with complete isolation from the rest of society. Today, the White House is an architectural paradox. From the outside, it is still the same perfect postcard image from a travel guide. The immaculate white paint is renewed annually, layer by layer. It hides the scars of 1814, making the stones smooth as plastic. Perfect tulips in the flower beds are replaced on schedule so that no wilting is visible. The illusion of control over nature is absolute. But inside, it is a cramped, crowded, stuffy office. The West Wing, which we see in movies as spacious, is actually a beehive. The low ceilings are oppressive, and the corridors are so narrow that it is difficult for two people to pass each other. The constant hum of powerful air conditioners fights the humidity of the old swamp, but mold is always nearby. Hundreds of people work elbow to elbow in rooms designed for dozens. By evening, the carbon dioxide level in the offices is off the charts. The building's infrastructure is operating at the limit of its physical capabilities. Cables laid in the 1990s for the internet lie on top of cables from the 1960s for special communications. Server rooms overheat, requiring more and more cooling.
It's overheating again. We're losing power to the mainframes.
We have a critical error on Sector 7. Look at the diagnostics.
The pipes and communications laid during the Truman era have already served their purpose for half a century. Each new generation of technology requires space that is physically unavailable. The steel skeleton from 1952 is holding up, but it's not made of rubber. The building is suffocating from its own electronic innards. Most importantly, it has ceased to be an organic part of the city. Now it's an island. The triple perimeter of steel fences is an eyesore. Concrete anti-ram blocks, cynically disguised as flower beds. Snipers on the roof, scanning the horizon 24/7. The building, which was constructed as a symbol of openness to the people, is now fenced off from them by a strip of alienation. Look at it again, at this shining portico on the evening news, against the backdrop of the dark sky. You don't see a building, you see a mask. Almost nothing remains of Washington and L'Enfant's original design from 200 years ago. Not a single molecule of the original material remains inside, except for the outer stone, and even that stone is saturated with chemicals to prevent it from crumbling into dust due to age. The White House is a story of form trying to hold on to content that has long outgrown the boundaries of form, becoming too heavy and toxic. It is a monument to human stubbornness and fear of change. We force these walls to stand, defying gravity, climate, fires, and logic. We spend billions because we need this symbol of stability. We need to believe that at least something in this world is unchanging. But power has physical weight, and this weight breaks the backs not only of people, but also of stone and steel. The White House stands not because it is inherently strong. It stands only because we do not allow it to fall, propping it up with crutches. But the price of this standing grows with each passing year, with each new cable, with each new bunker. And one day, perhaps, that price will become too high, even for the most powerful country in the world. But for now, the lights are still on in the windows. The flag is raised above the roof. The illusion of eternity continues.